These are hard acts to follow. I crawled through the night, through wet, heavy bushes, trying to ignore the splintered branches, tearing vulnerable flesh from my forearms, knees, and shins. The cotton shirt, capri pants, and open-toed sandals I'd put on in the morning promised comfort against the July heat, not protection from suburban landscape jungles. The screeching house alarm and glaring security lights bounced off the soft tissue of my eyes, my ears, my brain, until I was nearly deaf and blind from the sensory overload. Still, I scrambled on. What was left of my sentient matter was spiraling down to one thought: escape. The yard bordered in the pungent blooming lilacs did not rely on Mother Nature alone for enclosure. Behind the shrubbery, between me and the comforting blanket of darkness, was a 7-foot wall. A small portion of my brain, not functioning in complete panic, remembered the intricate design of the brick fence. Every so often, without overt pattern, one brick was turned out, creating a tiny shelf, a break in the monotony of tradition. I'd once set a cocktail on one during a tedious pool party some time back before I descended to my present feral state. Now I was heading for the far corner of the lot, praying that the mason was honorable and had continued the occasional brick turn even when he knew they would be hidden behind the hedge. At the corner, I thought, would be my best chance of climbing out of this madness. Voices carried above the shrieking alarm. A man yelled, "Stop!" I froze, resisting the urge to squeeze my eyes shut and thus engage the childhood cloak of invisibility. Instead, I looked over one shoulder and slowly raised a hand to shield my eyes from the spotlights. But he wasn't looking at me. I shuddered out of breath. He wasn't talking to me. He was Harvey Brooks from next door, and now my brain caught up with my ears and I processed the rest of his cry. "Stop this insanity," he'd said. He shook a fist at the house, at a figure silhouetted in the French doors that led to the back deck. It was Janice, standing in her bathrobe, waving one hand like she was directing a manic opera, while holding the other to the side of her face. "You better rethink the telephone," he yelled at her. "No one will hear you over the alarm wailing." "I can't believe someone broke into my home. It's all a terrible dream," she cried in a voice elevated to the pitch just within the limits of human register. I took in a ragged breath and slithered deeper into the bushes. Another sound fell on my pummeled eardrums. A police siren, faint, but getting stronger. The sheriff's department would soon be pulling into the main drag of our development. I pushed up from my knees to a staggering crouch and slapped at the undergrowth. Skin surrendered to the brick as my shoulder skimmed the rough surface beside me. I bit back a squeal of pain and stumbled on. Then my knuckles smacked into the solid barrier of the back wall, and I skidded to a stop. The siren was getting closer. In another minute, Janice would come to her senses, or Harvey would get through to her, and the alarm that was covering the sound of my escape would go off. It was time to go up. I pulled off the string backpack with its precious cargo, checked the slip knot on the opening, still tight. Sliding my arms through the cords, I settled it again between my shoulders. I hadn't come this far to lose my prize climbing over the wall. At the exact moment I looked up, someone shut off the security lights. The night sky blazed like the backdrop of a Star Wars movie. I slipped a battered sandal onto the highest little shelf I could find and began romancing the brick wall. Left foot then right, right hand then left, until I broke through the crown of a lilac and into the warm night air. Belly flat on the top wall, ribs screaming when my shirt rode up, I swung a leg over toward freedom. The bag slid to one side and made a scratching noise as nylon scraped along the capstone. I slung my other leg over and teetered there on forearms and belly for a moment, looking back at the house. No one seemed to notice. A sheriff's squad car drove into Janice's generous 3-car driveway, and its siren cut off in mid-wail. "Time to go," I whispered. I didn't want to see who'd caught the call. With my luck, it was probably my ex's month to work nights. I pushed back and dropped onto the hard-packed earth. Lights were coming on in houses with lots backed up to the service road between our properties. I ran in a crouch past 3 more fences till I came to the little park that pretended to be our town square. Still in shadows, I dropped the bag and slapped at my clothing until I was satisfied I looked more rumpled than suspicious. Then I settled the cords of the bag over the crook of one arm and straightened. Expanding my raw rib cage to capacity, I sucked in calming breaths. The heady scent of petunias and roses filled me with confidence. This was my park. This was my neighborhood. I belong here. I was president of the board, for goodness sake. I marched across the island of lamplight toward the low stone building that was my second home. When the lid came off this caper, Janice and everyone else in the area would just have to accept when a Pleasant Valley Library book was overdue. One way or the other, it would be returned.